Hello, welcome to the episode of the Bubbs on Sports podcast. Today is Wednesday, August 30th. Hope everyone's having a good day so far and a good rest of their day yesterday. We've got a lot to get into today on a Wednesday podcast. A little bit of football to open up the show today, and then we'll get into some baseball news later today as the New York Yankees made a couple moves, releasing Josh Donaldson and putting Harrison Bader on waivers. So the Harrison Bader situation is still fluid, still trying to figure out or potentially figuring out when he will get picked up, if he gets claimed by a team. It was weird because he was in the lineup last night, but he's on waivers, so a team can pick him up at any time, depending on how the waiver order works, in the MLB, depending on where you are in the waiver order and have first priority over other teams. So an interesting situation, especially for baseball in general. Angels released a ton of guys. Some of their guys, pieces like Grichuk, Lucas Giolito, so a couple pieces that they brought in at the deadline, it is completely blown up in their face, and they have now moved on. So an interesting situation right now, an interesting time of year for baseball as we wait for the rosters to expand in September. We'll get to that later on. Yankees got the win last night, so they win back-to-back games. They'll go for a series win today for the first time in forever. The last time they won a series was the Royals series sweep back in July, and after that series, they've had one series win since the start of July, and it was that Royals series sweep. They have yet to win a series in August, so they can do that tonight. We'll see if they get the job done with Cole on the mound. Tomorrow will close out August, so this is the last chance for the New York Yankees to potentially get a series win. Mets also lost last night, so they'll look to salvage the final game of a 3-game set tonight against the Texas Rangers back at Citi Field. So we'll open up today with our AFC North predictions. So on Monday, I did my AFC East. Yesterday, I did NFC standings predictions. Today, we're going to get to the NFC North. So the third division in 8 days here. Tomorrow, we'll take a look at the NFC North, and then Friday, we'll take a look at the AFC South. Monday, we'll take a look at the NFC South. Tuesday, we'll take a look at the AFC West, and then we'll close things out next Wednesday, a week from today, with the NFC West. So today's the AFC North. We'll give you my division predictions for this upcoming season. As I mentioned, we'll get to a little bit of Yankees baseball as well later on, releasing Josh Donaldson and putting Harrison Bader on waivers and what that means moving forward for the New York Yankees. We'll also get you set up for the Yankees-Tigers tonight and the Rangers and the Mets tonight as well, as the Mets look to avoid a series sweep. I mean, the New York baseball, it is just terrible. I mean, the Mets aren't any good. Yankees aren't any good. The only thing you have to look forward to as a Yankee fan is the potential of some of the young kids coming up. Maybe it's Dominguez, maybe it's Wells. We'll see if the Bader and, if Bader gets claimed and he officially, goes and is no longer on the roster. But even the whole Bader situation, I'll get into that later on. But you question the front office there as to why didn't you trade Harrison Bader when you could have gotten something for him at the deadline, which all of us Yankee fans were calling for, but the Yankees thought that they were still a contending team, which clearly they weren't. So we'll get into that later on. But we'll start off today with a little bit of football. As I mentioned, day number 3 of all 8 divisions. Well, I'll be predicting, breaking them down, giving my standings predictions. Again, Monday was the AFC East. Yesterday we did the NFC East. Today we're back in the AFC doing the AFC North. Tomorrow we'll head on over back to the NFC and do the NFC North standings there, which should be interesting because this is the first time in a very long time we'll be talking about the NFC North without Aaron Rodgers. So we'll get to that tomorrow. But today, AFC. So last year, the AFC North finished with the Bengals finishing in first at 12-4, Ravens in second at 10-7, Steelers finished in third with a 9-8 record, and the Browns came in last with a record of 7-10. So the Bengals and the Ravens both made the postseason. Bengals obviously won a division. Ravens came in second. Those two teams came in. Bengals actually beat the Ravens. Tyler Huntley and the Ravens in the wild card round. And the Bengals lost in the AFC Championship game to the Chiefs after defeating the Bills in the divisional round. They fell short of the Super Bowl, looking to make it there again. And the Bengals obviously making a Super Bowl back in 2021. Missed it last year. They look to get back here again this season with Joe Burrow and company leading the way. So again, this is one of these divisions in the AFC. I mean, you look at the AFC East, North, South, West. It's the best conference. It's the better conference in football. Obviously, the NFC is extremely weak. You're trying to figure out, when I've been writing down my stats and my standings predictions, it's been tough to figure out who the 7 teams in the NFC are. In the AFC, it's tough to figure out because there's 8, 9 realistic playoff teams, but only 7 spots. And this is another division where 3 of the 4 divisions in the AFC, you can make an argument that there could potentially be 3 playoff teams that come out of there. I don't think the AFC South is nearly as strong as the West, East, or North, but the North is another strong division where you can make a case for all 4 of these teams to make the postseason, especially going into this year with how each team has improved, the expectations around Deshaun Watson, the Steelers, and Kenny Pickett in year 2. There's a lot of expectations. There's a lot of potential again in this division. So here we go, standings predictions for AFC North. Starting off, I think this is obvious. First place, I've got the Cincinnati Bengals. They were first place last year, got to the Super Bowl 2 years ago, lost to the Rams, who were a buzzsaw, came very close last season to defeating the Chiefs in Arrowhead for the second year in a row and going back to the Super Bowl. As long as Joe Burrow is playing at the level he's playing at, again, the Mahomeses, the Burrows, the Josh Allens, the Justin Herberts, now Rodgers entering, as long as those guys are playing up to the level that they've played at throughout their career and the level you expect them to continue to play with, specifically Burrow and Mahomes, who are all the younger guys, same thing with Allen. As long as those guys are playing at a high level, they're going to be in the conversation every year, and they're going to be upwards near the top of their division every season. And that's the same here with the Bengals. My one thing with the Bengals is Burrow is hurt right now. We don't know if he will be ready for week 1. Zach Taylor mentioned the other day, we'll see about practicing. They visit Cleveland in week 1 on the road, so we'll see how that all plays out. That is why my floor for the Bengals is 8-9, because worst case scenario, Burrow misses the first part of the season and they struggle a little bit, then they got to make their way back later in the year, and if it doesn't go as planned there. So I do think their floor is a little bit lower than past years just because of the Burrow injury concerns. But if Burrow's healthy and he's playing at the level we expect him to play at, this team's going to be right back in the conversation again for a top spot in the AFC. And you wouldn't be surprised if they're right back in there at an AFC championship game again this year. Whether that's an Arrowhead, whether it's home, whatever it might be, this team's going to be knocking on a door of another Super Bowl appearance. I mean, when you look at their roster, you've got Burrow, you've got Joe Mixon, you've got a 3-headed monster at receiver with Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd. Defensively, I think they're actually underrated defensively at times. Trey Hendrickson, who's one of the best pure edge rushers in football. You have a run stopper in DJ Reader. You have more of a pass rushing type interior defensive lineman in BJ Hill. You look at Logan Wilson, who's 100-plus tackles each of the past 2 seasons at linebacker. I don't love their secondary. I will admit you don't love it, and you've seen that be one of the issues with the Bengals is their secondary, specifically in the Super Bowl with the whole Eli Apple situation and all the trash talking, and then he let up a touchdown in the Super Bowl. So you don't love the Bengals secondary, but you like their linebackers. You like the defensive line, an underrated defensive line, specifically with Trey Hendrickson, who's a guy that has the ability to go out there and, put up, 10-plus sacks a season. Obviously, he's only 2 years removed from having a 14.5 sack season. Last year he only had 8 sacks, missed some time. One of the better edge rushers, one of the more underrated edge rushers in football. The Bengals are a complete team. Again, as long as Burrow's healthy, and that's my biggest thing. As long as Burrow's healthy, because he's injured right now. We don't know if he's going to play week 1. We don't know how long he's going to be out. He's not back practicing just yet. As long as he's healthy and ready to go and doesn't miss a good chunk of time to start the season, this team's going to be right back in the conversation. Why I think their floor is a little lower than where it's been past years is because of the Burrow injury this offseason. But as long as he's healthy, this is a team that's going to be right back in it to potentially go out and win a Super Bowl. My ceiling for them is 14-3. They're one of the best teams in football. They've got one of the best rosters in football. Jamar Chase, if he's healthy this year, he'll be right back up in the top 6, top 5 in receiving yards. I think he's a top 5 receiver. I mean, you got a top 5 quarterback, top 5 receiver. You've got a top 10 running back. This team's got weapons. I have them 13-4 winning the division. Bengals win a division in the AFC North for the second year in a row. We go to the Ravens now. Second place, I've got the Baltimore Ravens. Ravens are coming off of a really interesting year because Lamar Jackson started the year healthy. He ends up getting hurt. They go out and Tyler Huntley has to play. Tyler Huntley comes in, replaces Lamar Jackson. They get to the postseason. They end up losing to the Bengals, obviously in the wild card round, as I mentioned earlier. And it was kind of a weird season because they lost 3 of their last 4. They barely got into the postseason with a 10-7 record. Pittsburgh was right behind them, making a late push, in the AFC. It was a very weird year for Baltimore. And this is another team where the floor is lower than a lot of other. This team has a high ceiling. The Ravens on paper, if Lamar Jackson's healthy, they're on paper a very good team. They're on paper a team that can go out and make the playoffs again. But again, similar to the Bengals with the injury to Burrow, it concerns you a little bit. Same thing here with Lamar Jackson. He's played 12 games each of the past 2 seasons. You don't love that if you're a Raven fan. You don't love that if you're an NFL fan, potentially going out and predicting the Ravens to do anything big time this season. That's my biggest concern when it comes to this team. And that's why my floor for the Ravens is at 7-10, because there's that possibility if Lamar Jackson, fresh off the massive contract this past offseason, if this is a guy that goes out there and plays 12 games again, they're going to be hovering around that 9-10 win mark, and they're just going to squeak into the playoffs. Now, if Lamar Jackson's able to stay healthy and able to go out there and run around like a madman like he's been able to do throughout his NFL career, they're going to be, again, in the conversation to make a deep run in the postseason. The postseason success with the Ravens does concern me because Lamar has not proven it in the postseason. This team as a whole hasn't proven it to the postseason. But they've been able to get the job done without the receivers. And again, that's something I want to note here is for many years now, we've talked about this Ravens receiving core, and we say, man, it's not great. It's not very good. You look at it, Rashad Bateman, they obviously added Odell Beckham in this offseason, pried him away from the Jets. Last second, Ravens came in, gave him, I think, $3 million more, and he went to Baltimore instead of going to the Jets. They've obviously, got an excellent tight end, Mark Andrews. J.K. Dobbins, he had a torn ACL, only played 8 games last year coming off that injury. Early in the season has dealt with injuries. You expect J.K. Dobbins, now that he's fully healthy, you expect him to come out and have a bigger year. I have gotten to the point where I have moved on from the criticism of the Ravens receiving core because they've been able to get the job done without a true number one receiver. Hollywood Brown, now with Arizona. They have Rashad Bateman, who showed some positives that, obviously missed some time last year. But all in all, the Ravens are a team with a running quarterback, with a good backfield, with Gus Edwards, J.K. Dobbins leading the way. They are a team that has been able to get the job done without having a star-studded receiving core, and they've been able to get the job done with having a big-time tight end in Mark Andrews. So I think the Ravens are going to be back out there. Again, I think their floor is a little bit lower just because of the Lamar Jackson injury concern, and I think the division has actually gotten better. So if Lamar Jackson misses time this year, I don't know if they'll be able to get away with it as much as they used to because you're going to have the Steelers and the Browns, who I think will both be improved from a year ago. Their ceiling I have at 13-4. Again, Lamar Jackson stays healthy. This is a team, they added Odell, which is a nice piece for them to add. Kind of a guy that fits well in their offense. Again, Mark Andrews. Their defense has got some pieces like Kyle Hamilton, Roquan Smith, who they obviously added from Chicago, Patrick Queen. So there's certainly, they've got a good, solid roster. Again, not in love with the receiving core. If Lamar can stay healthy, though, you like the quarterback. I think he's a little bit overrated, but they're going to back in the postseason as long as Lamar stays healthy. Ravens 11-6. They finished second in the AFC North. So we move on now to third place. This is where it gets interesting. I have the Browns finishing in third, and I've got the Steelers finishing last. Now, I do have both teams at the same record. I just have the Browns winning the tiebreaker. I am very kind of the Browns have been under the radar this year. I actually like the Browns. I do. Again, you look back at last season, they won 7 games. They were 7-10. They started the year with Brissett, ended the year with Watson because of the suspension. They gave Watson that massive contract, and right now it's been ugly. It's been ugly to say the least when it comes to talking about that Lamar Jackson or Deshaun Watson contract. It hasn't been pretty so far. Suspended last season, even when he was out there, didn't look like the same Lamar Jackson. But I think the Browns are a little bit underrated. I do. Now, when you look at this team, there is the potential. They are a very boom-bust team. I don't look at the Browns as this elite team where they're going to go out there and win 13 games this year and be in the conversation to win the AFC. I just don't see Deshaun Watson being that type of quarterback. But I also don't see Deshaun Watson being just a scrub. I think a lot of people out there feel that Deshaun Watson has completely lost it. And I just don't see that. I feel like last year, he didn't show you a lot in the games that he played late in the year after the suspension. They only won 7 games. They missed the playoffs. Stefanski's on the hot seat. I know on paper, on the outside, it might look ugly, but I just can't see where Watson doesn't come back this season and produces at a much higher level. I think Watson's going to have a bounce-back season. I really do. He's still got Amari Cooper. He's got a solid tight end, David Njoku. Elijah Moore, I think, will do well. Again, as a Jet fan, he wasn't great with us. Part of that was the quarterback. Part of that was him being more of a me guy, requested a trade during a win streak. I didn't like the way it ended with Elijah Moore, but he's had a good camp for Cleveland. You can't take that away from him. I think the Browns will utilize him. I think Watson will be able to get him the ball. I think you'll see certainly more production out of Elijah Moore. I don't know if Elijah Moore will ever be what we expect him to be. I think he was a little overhyped out of college, specifically from Jets fans. I think we overhyped him a little bit. I mean, the guy was a second-round pick after all. It wasn't like he was a top 10 pick like a Garrett Wilson. I do think we overhyped him a little bit, but I do think he's still a guy that's got speed, good across the middle, good yards after the catch. So you add him, you have Amari Cooper. I know Amari Cooper is getting to that point in his career where it could be towards the end. Again, he's up there in age, spent time with Raiders, Cowboys, now the Browns. Might not quite be the same guy he once was, but he's still a solid number one option. I like this Browns offense. I do. And again, don't think I'm forgetting about Nick Chubb, one of the best running backs in football. He's a workhorse. And that's why I think, too, is they've got a safety blanket with Nick Chubb. If Watson, the reason they won 7 games last year, the reason they were able to find a way to compete with Jacoby Brissett was Nick Chubb. Nick Chubb's a workhorse. If Watson isn't, all Watson, in my opinion, has to be is an average to a little bit of above average quarterback for this team to have success, because you've got the running game with Nick Chubb that's, I think, the best in division. So, and one of the best running backs, I think he's one of the best running backs in all of football. So that's my thing. I think a lot of people feel like Deshaun Watson has to be this top 5 quarterback for this team to have success. I don't necessarily see that. They won 7 games last year with terrible quarterback play. If you get above average quarterback play from Watson, which I think you'll get a full season, full off season to learn more of the system, build more chemistry with the teammates. It's tough to come into the middle of the season last year when the team was struggling and try to build chemistry on the fly like that. He's had all off season. He's had the entire training camp. I think you'll see a bounce back year. I don't think this Browns team's going to go out there and win 11 games. I do think their ceiling is 12-5, and their ceiling is if Watson shows you what it was a couple years ago. If Watson goes out there and plays like he did in Houston, this team can easily be a 11-12 win team. Again, their floor 6-11, and that is if Watson goes out there and plays like he did last year, and they were a 7-win team last year. So it's not crazy to say that their floor is 6-11. They were a disaster last season. That's one way to put it. And again, they didn't really have quarterback play, and they still found a way to win 7 games. So I think their floor is around that 6-11, 7-10. My prediction's 9-8. I was gonna put them at a 10-win mark. I just don't. I don't see it. Again, like their defense, Denzel Ward, Myles Garrett. You added Zadarius Smith. You added Dalvin Tomlinson. Zadarius Smith coming off a massive year last year for Minnesota. You added him. You brought in Dalvin Tomlinson. A big body to have in the interior. Myles Garrett, Zadarius Smith on the edge. It's exciting. Browns have got some talent. 9-8. Cleveland finishes in 3rd. 4th place, I got the Steelers. The Steelers, every year whenever I do these predictions, the Steelers are such a weird team because you never really know how to feel. Mike Tomlin is going to have this team every season. They're going to be in the conversation. Whether they have a rookie quarterback and a Mitch Trubisky, Kenny Pickett ran quarterback last year, or you have Ben Roethlisberger, which they had for obviously many years prior to that, this team's going to be in the conversation. And again, this year, they're going to be competitive. Every year, the Steelers are going to be competitive. There will never be a season. I thought last year would be the first time that Mike Tomlin had an under 500 season. I thought last year would be the first time. And I was wrong. They went out and won 9 games. They missed the postseason, but they went out and won 9 games, found a way to finish 500. I do have them finishing 9-8. I think the Browns will defeat them. I think the Browns will have the tiebreaker, and that's why I have the Browns finishing 3rd. I think the Browns are just a little bit more talented. I also trust the quarterback a little bit more than Cleveland. I still think the Steelers, I think they'll be competitive. I'll tell you right now, again, 9-8, I have the Steelers. The Steelers are always going to be a team with a high floor, low ceiling. Their floor, in my opinion, 7-10, which for a team with a second-year quarterback is not bad. I mean, I had the Jets' floor last year. I think it was like 4-13, which was in terms of if Zach was a disaster, and which he was, but obviously their defense was able to win him some games. The Steelers, what I'm trying to say is the Steelers are always going to be a high-floor team. They're never going to have a 5-win season. They're never going to go out there and go 4-13, 5-12 under Tomlin. At worst, they're a 7-8 win team. At best, I think they're probably a 10-win team. I don't think they would. I just don't see them going out there and winning 11 games this year. I think potentially they could get to a 10-win mark and finish in 3rd. I still think they're a year away. Again, I like some of their. I still think they're lacking. Again, development. George Pickens, Deontay Johnson. They've obviously got Allen Robinson, a veteran that they added to that receiving room. Najee Harris. You've got Pat Freiermuth, who I think is, top 5 tight end in football. They've got some pieces, but the quarterback's in his second year. Kenny Pickett, he showed some positives last season. He had those growing pains. I think he'll come out this season. I think you'll see improvement from Kenny Pickett, but I still think this team's a year away from being back into that conversation of being a legitimate threat to make the playoffs and make noise in the postseason. If Pickett takes a year to jump and they win 9 games this year, which is what I'm expecting, you go out there next year, and that's where you look for 10, 11 wins. That's where you look to go back and make the postseason and make noise and get back to being that team that can be a legitimate threat in the postseason. That's what I think. So I'm going floor 7-10, ceiling 10-7. Prediction, I think they'll go 9-8, finishing last, which is not a bad last place finish to finish 9-8. Again, I think they're still a year away. They've got a lot of young talent. Like Pickens has still got to develop. You want to see more from Pickett. I still think they're a year away from legitimately being a team that I don't think will push for the division, because I don't ever see a world where Kenny Pickett could outplay Joe Burrow. But I think they'll be back in the conversation of, again, they're going to be in the conversation. They're going to be playing meaningful games in December. And that's the one thing with Pittsburgh. Every year, they'll be playing meaningful games in December. Doesn't mean they're going to make the playoffs, but they're going to be playing meaningful games. And I see that again this year. You love their defense. TJ Watt, Minka Fitzpatrick, Cam Hayward, Joey Porter Jr., the rookie. You've got a veteran in Levi Wallace who's coming off a year where he had a career high in interceptions. They've got a nice mix of some veteran talent like Minka Fitzpatrick and some young talent like Joey Porter's got some upside. A lot of people in Pittsburgh like that pick. So they've got some of that young talent, got a good mix of some veteran talent. Again, added Allen Robinson to a room that includes George Pickens that is still younger, still developing. Good tight end, the second-year quarterback. That's a concern. I mean, again, like on paper, and this isn't anything against Kenny Pickett, because I do think Kenny Pickett has some upside. I don't know if he will. It's tough to say how good I think he'll be good this year. I don't think he'll be terrible. I don't think he'll be great. I think you'll see a year 2 jump, but I still think he's a year away from truly making a massive jump if he's going to be the franchise guy. But when you look at his division, this isn't against Kenny Pickett, but if Deshaun Watson plays like he used to play, let's say Deshaun Watson's just maybe a couple ticks below what he was in Houston, you have the worst quarterback in the division. And now I don't want to sound negative when I say that, but Lamar, Burrow, Deshaun Watson would all be better than Pickett if Pickett takes a minor step this year. If he takes a massive jump and is playing out of his mind, then potentially he could be better than Watson. Maybe he jumps Lamar. I don't think that would happen, but it's a quarterback-loaded division, headlined by Joe Burrow. So all in all, I have the Bengals and the Ravens making the postseason. I have the Browns and the Steelers missing. So 2 divisions down now in the AFC. AFC East, I've got the Jets and the Bills making the playoffs. In the AFC North, I've got the Bengals and the Ravens. So 2 divisions left, and I've got 4 playoff teams. So you've got 4 playoff teams already in. 7 teams, obviously. 7 teams make the playoffs with the expanded playoff format, obviously. So it's 7 teams. So far, I've got 4 of my 7 AFC playoff teams filled out. AFC South will be on Friday, and the AFC West will be on Tuesday. So we'll fill out the rest of our 3 AFC playoff teams. Again, Bengals in first, 13-4. Ravens in second, 11-6. Both those teams make the postseason. Browns in third at 10-8. Steelers at fourth, Browns in third at 9-8. Steelers in fourth at 9-8. Both those teams missed the postseason but finished with winning records. And the AFC North will send the Bengals and the Ravens back into the postseason for another year with both those teams leading the division. So that's what I got for my AFC North predictions. Tomorrow, I'll do NFC North. We will take a look at a first time in a very long time. First time ever. We'll take a look at the NFC North without Aaron Rodgers. How does that division play out? Lions, Vikings, Bears, Packers. An interesting under-the-radar division that could potentially make some noise in the NFC, which is a very, very weak conference, as we all know. So we move on here to a little bit of baseball. The Yankees yesterday made a couple moves, moving on from Josh Donaldson and Harrison Bader. They also got the win last night, 4-2. Not that that matters, because the season is lost, so wins at this point don't mean anything. But for a quick update, they are 64-68 on the season, 19 games back of first. And in the wild card, they are still a nice 11 games back in the wild card. Still have a minus 18 run differential. They'll look for a series win today for the first time in forever, it seems. Last time they won a series was late July, where they swept the Royals, which isn't much of an accomplishment, but they did it. And since that point, they have been a disaster pretty much all year long. So today they'll wrap third game of a 4-game set against the Tigers. Got some news yesterday for the Yankees. Obviously, as you enter into September, where rosters expand, and that's where you get all your September call-ups. From a Yankee perspective, no postseason, no October baseball this year in the Bronx. So you're looking ahead to some of the young guys. You're looking ahead to next season. You're looking ahead to what some of these young guys can do. The Yankees have already began calling up guys like Oswald Peraza, Everson Pereira. Neither of whom I've liked Pereira so far. The way he's worked some walks. I think he's had some good at bats. He hasn't put together much hits. He hasn't put together much. Like, there's not much to show for it, but his at-bat quality, I think, has been okay. I think he's worked, again, some walks. I think he had 2 walks again last night. Peraza, look, you got to give him more time. Again, you got to roll these guys out there every day. I'm a little worried about Peraza. I'm starting to wonder if he is not quite what we expected him to be. I mean, he's batting since coming up. He's done pretty much nothing. Him and Pereira, but again, I think Pereira is close. It's his first time getting called up. Then the guy's not going to roll out of bed and hit 350 in his first 5 games is in the MLB. It's just not going to happen. Guys are going to go through growing pains. I mean, look at Volpe. He started out the season really slow, and he's starting to pick it up now, really since June, since the chicken parm dinner with Austin Wells. The numbers are crazy when you look at the prior numbers to where they are now. Hit another home run last night. Volpe's putting together a pretty good rookie year. Like, you look at his rookie year as a whole, it's not bad. I mean, if you would have told me in the beginning of the year, Volpe probably goes out for 20, 23 home runs and 20, 25 steals, I would have took that any day, and he's right on path to do that. Yes, the batting average is down. Yes, the OPS is down, but for a rookie to hit 220 and go out there and hit 20-plus home runs, have a 2020 season for a rookie is pretty solid. For the New York Yankees, on a team where he had a lot of pressure coming in and being the number 1 overall prospect, I'd take that for Volpe. And it's good that you're seeing that constant success or that constant progress where he struggled to start the season and has gotten better as the year went on. And that's what you expected. Early season struggles, but when the year ended, you felt good about it because he puts together a couple strong months to finish the season. And he's really done that. I mean, you split his year in half. April, May, and half of June was ugly. And then half of June, July, and August has been really good, and he looks to finish strong, too, coming up in September. But the moves they made today, speaking of all the kids and the guys that they're calling up, is Josh Donaldson. So they released Donaldson yesterday. I mean, this was long overdue. You wondered why Josh Donaldson was even in the lineup this year in the first place. A lot of Yankee fans, including myself, were calling for him to be gone before the season even started, but the Yankees felt that was necessary. They felt they could still find something in him. All in all, he was a disaster. I mean, you look back at that trade, Gary Sanchez is with San Diego now. Gio Urshela's with the Angels. He's hurt. And then you look at what the Yankees got back. Donaldson's gone. Rortvedt is nothing. And then, IKF was, struggled at shortstop last year and has now turned into a utility guy. I think IKF's been good, but he is a free agent at the end of the year. Will the Yankees bring him back? Who knows? So there's a good chance at the end of this season, if IKF signs elsewhere, Rortvedt's not going to play a role in the team next year. There's a good chance all 5 of the guys that are included that trade are no longer on the teams that they got traded to, with Gary and Gio both being gone out of Minnesota, Donaldson now being out. Rortvedt, I don't even consider Rortvedt's not, he's not, like, I don't even consider him a part of the trade. He doesn't do anything. He hits an occasional home run. He's hitting like a $110 maybe. I don't even know. Rortvedt's terrible, but Donaldson was the big headliner, and that's why I consider this trade a loss for the Yankees, because Donaldson was the big headline in the trade. You go back to the Brian Cashman quote where he said, Gio Urshela is, or we like Gio Urshela, but he's not Josh Donaldson. I mean, he's right in the fact that Josh Donaldson is a lot worse than Gio Urshela. He's not better than Gio Urshela. But I hope this move, too, wakes up somebody within the Yankee organization, because let's be honest here. This was another move that the Yankees made where they thought they were smarter than everybody else. They thought their analytical approach to baseball, their analytical approach to hitting, they thought Dylan Lawson and company could get Josh Donaldson back into the form that he was in his MVP campaign in 2015 when, you look back on that 2015 campaign and you realize it's 2023 and it's 8 years ago, and he's aged significantly since that point. I don't know what the Yankees saw in Josh Donaldson to think it was a good idea to go out and make a trade for him, when for the last couple seasons he's bounced around from Atlanta to Minnesota, now at the Yankees, now to another team. I'm in Cleveland, Atlanta, Minnesota, Yankees. Now he's on his way to potentially signing with another team. He was a disaster. In 165 games with the New York Yankees over 2 seasons, he hit 207. 207. And this year specifically, in the 33 games that he played, he hit 142 and an OPS of 659. The Yankees talk about power. Oh, he brought pop. You saw the home run numbers take a dip. The OPS the OPS has not reached back in his last 2 seasons in a row. He's had an OPS below 700. His batting average has dropped significantly. This is a guy that's a career 262 hitter. Donaldson in his prime was a 260, in his prime, he was actually a 270, 280, anywhere could up to 290, which he hit in his MVP season. But in his career, he's a 260 hitter with power. He came to the Yankees, hit 222, and delivered no power. So it was a disaster. You look at the defense, fine, it was okay. The Yankees, I think, thought too that he was that he added an edge to this locker room, which I still never understood the aspect of bringing him in, when the season before that he criticized the ace of your staff for the sticky stuff situation with Garrett Cole. So then to have him criticize him and then say, hey, let's trade for you and bring you into the same locker room with Garrett Cole didn't make much sense in the first place. But again, this is another Yankee move. It's a move where they thought they were smarter than everybody else. They thought this was a great idea, giving away a younger player in his prime in Gio Urshela for an older guy, not in his prime, in Josh Donaldson. But the reason the Yankees did that is because they thought their analytical approach can help him get back to his form 8 years ago, even though he's 37 years older. And 8 years ago, things happen in those 8 years where he's not the same player he once was. And they also traded away batting average and contact for power. Gio Urshela was a 270, 280 hitter with the Yankees. They traded that in for a 220 hitter that's going to strike out a lot but hit for power. And he struck out a lot. He didn't hit much for power. And his batting average was as low as advertised, 222 last year, and was 142 this season. So, this is another trade too. If this was any other organization, this is a fireable offense. To bring in a guy like a Josh Donaldson, act like it's a good move, and have it blow up in your face, and then to take on that contract, take on that salary. Look, he's finally gone. It's good, but it's still just another reminder of how much the Yankees have messed up over the years, or specifically recently, with moves like this and thinking these moves are good, and the fact that Cashman continues to get away with moves like this. And again, there's a lot of other bad contracts on the team. And you looked at the Yankees' contracts last year. Stanton, Cole were the top guys, and Judge were the 3 top guys contract-wise. And then Donaldson was the 4th. It's like, how does that add up? Donaldson, you take on the terrible contract, which was a disaster. So Donaldson's gone, finally. And, all you can do is move on. That's all you can do. And again, they cut bait with Hicks. I guess you got to give him some credit for finally moving on from Donaldson. But again, I don't know why they didn't do this earlier. I would have did this in the offseason. I think last year he showed you enough to get rid of him. He was terrible last season. How many times do we have to sit there, especially in the postseason, and watch him look at strikes right down the middle? And that goes back to the whole Dylan Lawson thing, where the Yankees' approach was swing early, look late. Donaldson really embodied that approach. How many times did we have to sit there as Yankee fans, especially in the postseason, where he hit a whopping 172 where he hit a whopping 172 in the postseason last year. He went 5 for 29 with 5 for 29 with 16 strikeouts. I don't have how many of those we're looking, but how many times did we have to sit there and watch Josh Donaldson in the lineup every day look at strikes right down the middle, and he would look at them all the time. He had a lot of 2 strikeout games, 1, 2, 3 strikeout games in the postseason last year. A disaster. How many times? And the Yankees continue to just plug him into the lineup every single day. So the other move they made was Harrison Bader. They waived him yesterday. Now, again, he's on waivers, so he can get picked up. The waiver situation in MLB right now is interesting with the way it's working and with all these guys getting waived. But he's on waivers, so a team can pick him up. If he clears waivers, he can come back to the Yankees, but he's technically still on the Yankees until somebody claims him. So he was in the lineup last night, went over, actually made an error. I thought he handled it. Watching back the interview, he handled it very well. Before I get into Bader himself, I think this was another, again, you talk about the Donaldson trade, and you talk about this Yankee organization as a whole and how there is just an internal fire burning within this organization, and it's only getting worse. But the way Harrison Bader found out yesterday that he was waived and put on waivers was he was eating lunch inside of the clubhouse, and he got an ESPN notification come up on his phone. That's how he found out. Like, the Yankees didn't tell him. That's how he found out. So, you talk about all the time how Boone has good communication with the players. That's not true. And I'm so sick of that notion that Boone has great communication. Boone always says, communicating with the players, whether it's injury-related or not. That is such a stupid thing to say because it's simply not true. Boone clearly doesn't have any communication with the players. The communication barrier there is obviously broke because we've had so many incidents with Jose Trevino, Anthony Rizzo with the injury situations where he kept throwing them out there even though they were hurt. Now with Bader, he gets waived, and they don't tell him. He finds out like everybody else did with an ESPN notification that came off his phone saying that Bader got waived. That's how he found out. Another eye-opening situation if you're the Yankees organization that they got to blow this thing up and they got to restart. I was for trading Bader. He's a free agent at the end of the year. I don't know why you're waiving Bader right now, though. If the Yankees should have traded Bader and got something for him. And that's my point of this all. Is, again, I'm not upset they waived him. I really don't. I don't really know how to. They waived him. He's still on the team right now. I don't disagree with the move because you want to call up young guys. Potentially that's Wells. Potentially that's Dominguez. But if you were going to, why waive Bader now when a month ago, or earlier this month on August 1st, you could have traded for him? And we talked about this. The Yankees could have got rid of guys that were going to be free agents next year, trade them, get something for them, and then if they wanted to re-sign them in the offseason, you could have went out there and re-signed him in the offseason. Why now waive him, get nothing for him, lose him if he gets claimed? It makes no sense. If you were going to do it, you should have just went back in early August when the trade deadline came. You should have traded him and got something for him. You should have. I don't know why now, let's waive him. It makes no sense. It makes no sense, the process that the Yankees do things nowadays, where they feel it's a smart idea to not trade Harrison Bader, waive him instead, and get nothing for him. And I go back to the Chapman trade a couple years ago. They traded Chapman 2016, got Glaber back, at the time was a prospect, and he was a free agent at the end of the year. So they traded Chapman. They weren't going anywhere in 2016. Then in the offseason, Chapman was a free agent. They signed Chapman back. I know that's rare. A lot of times when you trade a guy and he's a free agent at the end of the year, you usually don't re-sign him. But that was a case where Chapman was traded, won a World Series with the Cubs, came back with the Yankees back in the offseason of 2017, or 2016 rather, and then joined the Yankees for the 2017 season. It could have been the same situation. You could have traded Bader, got some prospects back, and got something for him, at least to build up the farm a little bit, and you could have got him back in the offseason. You waive him now if somebody claims you don't get anything for him. It makes no sense. So, and again, I wasn't for trading Bader because he wasn't good. I was for trading Bader because I wanted to get rid of as many free agents as I could to get something for him now, because at the end of the year, they're just all going to walk and you're not going to get anything for him. I would have began the rebuilding process earlier, trade them to call up the young guys, to open up space for the young guys, and get more prospects in return. I still don't think the Yankees would have re-signed Bader in the offseason because you've got Dominguez coming up. Depending on what you do in left field, you can always go out and get a Bellinger, or if Everson Pereira shows you enough over the next month to go into spring training and compete for a job. It's tough to figure out the outfield spot. Bader I like the energy he brings. He's been a solid player for the last, year really since coming over at the deadline, but he's injury prone. And that's the thing. He was good in the postseason. He's a little bit up and down. He brings a good energy, brings a good spark, very good defensively. His bat's hot and cold, but he brings energy. And, he handled it well yesterday. He's a good locker room guy. Looking back on the trade, the Yankees probably lost it because Montgomery's got one of the best ERAs in the National League right now, and the Yankees could use pitching right now. But, that's just Cashman failing in the pitching department again, going out and getting Rodon, and he's been a disaster, and I know he's had a couple good starts in a row, but I still need to see a whole lot more out of Rodon to completely believe in him. But yeah, Bader, it's just I'm not, I don't really care that they waived him. I don't, because great you call up the young guys, but it makes you frustrated because if they could have did this earlier. And again, you don't know how the whole dynamic in the Yankee front office is weird, because you've gotten some rumors that Steinbrenner was telling Howe was telling Cashman not to sell, and then you also heard those rumors that Cashman didn't want to sell. You really don't know what to believe. Either way, they didn't sell at the deadline. What they did was they acquired a reliever, which the bullpen was actually the strength of their team. Although it's not been a strength recently, especially Clay Holmes. You got to go out and find a reliever. And we talked about this again, too, is something that the Yankees avoided in the offseason. They should have went out and got a legitimate closer. Clay Holmes is not a closer. We saw this last year. He's not a closer. And how many more times do we have to see him struggle in the closer role or show inconsistency in the closer role and avoid addressing it? We talked about this, too, again, earlier in the year. If the Yankees would to have went out and bought at the deadline, they could have. If they were going to go out and maybe soft buy at the deadline, they could have brought in a closer, not a mid reliever. Like, Clay Holmes is not a closer. They got to address that. He's not a closer. The Yankees, we've how many more times do we have to see this, where this organization feels the need to use a guy in a role he's not good at? They did this with IKF. They used him at shortstop when he's not a shortstop, and they used him there anyway. Clay Holmes is not a closer, but let's put him in closing situations because we're smarter than everybody else, even though you're not. So, I don't know. It's just thankfully only one more month of the season. Not that you don't even watching the games anymore. You don't even care. Like, you're sitting there watching the games. You genuinely don't care about the results anymore because you got to look ahead to next year. As for the game tonight, Cole will take the mound. He's 11-4 with a 2.95 ERA. That is something worth watching for. His Cy Young push. Hopefully strengthens up tonight with a good start against the Tigers. The Mets are another disaster. Again, it's so funny to think. I mean, how it is so crazy to think. I talked about this yesterday. How irrelevant baseball has come, and how just front and center the football season has become in New York, because the both baseball teams are nowhere to be seen, and both football teams have playoff aspirations. When you look at the Rangers tonight, they got Dane Dunning on the mound. He's 9-6 with a 3.36 ERA. And as for the Mets, they've got Denyi Reyes on the mound. He's 0-2 with a 7.50 ERA. So the Mets look to avoid a sweep. They are 60-73. Yankees are 64-68. And the big conversation around the Mets has been Pete Alonso, which will be interesting. You've heard so many reports that they want to trade him. Then you heard reports today that from Fox Sports that guys in the locker room don't want him to get traded. So an interesting situation there with the Mets. But it's just going to be a really interesting offseason for New York baseball, because it seems as if the Mets are going to rebuild, retool. How do they do that? Or does Steve Cohen? Steve Cohen does have as deep as pockets as anybody. So does he go out and spend and try and win another championship again next season? And what do the Yankees do? They probably hold on to everybody, which is not smart, but they probably will. What do? Do they retool, or do they go out and does Hal maybe wake up and say, you know what, I'm going to go on a spending spree, and I'm going to bring in guys like Bellinger. I don't think Ohtani will ever come here, but does that ever happen? Ideally, if you're the Yankees, you call up Dominguez next year. You put Judge and Wright, and your left fielder is Bellinger. That would be the ideal outfield. What you do in the infield, I haven't loved what I've seen out of Peraza. Do you trade Glaber? What happens to Rizzo? You have Wells, but if Wells plays first, then who's your catcher? You need another starter outside of Cole, because Cole, Nestor's, he's dealt with injuries this year. I just don't know really how to feel about Nestor's. Sevy's gone. Clark Schmidt's not a guy you want in the rotation the entire season. You need a back end of the rotation guy. Montez is gone too. You really are stuck with Rodon and Cole. So you kind of question, okay, if Rodon's not good, then really you're stuck with Cole. You need another back end of the rotation guy for the Yankees, because Ramon's gone too. The Yankees went into the season with the best rotation on paper, and they've come at it with 4 questions outside of Garrett Cole. So It'll be interesting. But that'll do it for an episode of the Bubbs on Sports podcast. We'll be back tomorrow with my NFC North standings and talking all things sports. And we'll see you back here tomorrow. As always, hope you enjoyed it, and thanks for watching.